Before I tell you what happened to me, I need you to promise me something. If you ever move into a new house and there's a tree house in the backyard that the previous owners left behind, burn it down. I don't care how nice it looks. Just burn it to the ground and salt the earth beneath it. I know that sounds insane, but after what I experienced, I'd rather sound crazy than let another family go through what mine did. There's no happy ending here. Some things can't be fixed, can't be explained, and definitely can't be forgotten. My name is Marcus. When I was 11 years old, my family moved into what my parents called their dream house. It was in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. The house itself was beautiful, but the real selling point was the backyard. The backyard was massive, with wild blackberry bushes growing along the back fence and a little creek in the far corner. But right in the center of it all, built into this absolutely enormous oak tree, was a treehouse. Not some rickety platform, but an actual structure with walls, a shingled roof, and a proper wooden staircase that spiraled around the trunk. The realtor told my parents that the previous owners had hired a professional carpenter to build it for their kids. Apparently, most families with young kids had already bought homes in the area, so they'd had trouble finding buyers who'd appreciate it. That should have been our first warning. Why would someone build something so permanent, so carefully constructed, and then just leave it behind? My dad inspected every inch of that treehouse before he'd let us play in it. He was a safety inspector for construction sites, so he knew what to look for. After about an hour of poking around, he gave us the green light. The treehouse was solid, built to last decades. He seemed almost impressed by the craftsmanship. Emma was 8 at the time, and she was absolutely obsessed with that treehouse from day one. She'd spend hours up there, sometimes by herself, just playing or reading. The inside was surprisingly spacious, with small windows on all 4 sides that gave you a perfect view of the entire backyard. There was even a little trapdoor in the floor that you could open to drop things down, though my dad made us promise never to use it. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect. It felt like we'd won some kind of lottery. Our parents seemed happier too, less stressed about money and work. But then Emma started acting strange. It was subtle at first. She'd come inside from the treehouse and go straight to her room without saying anything. She'd zone out during dinner, staring at her plate like she was trying to solve some complicated math problem. My parents chalked it up to the stress of moving and starting at a new school. One evening, about a month after we'd moved in, I climbed up to the treehouse to grab a book I'd left there. Emma was already inside, sitting on one of the benches with her back to me. She didn't turn around when I came up the stairs, which was odd because the steps were pretty creaky and impossible to climb quietly. I said her name, but she didn't respond. I walked over and sat down next to the bench. That's when I noticed something. The air felt wrong. She asked me if I'd ever noticed anything weird about the treehouse. She didn't answer right away, just looked back out the window like she was checking to see if someone was watching us. Then she leaned in close and whispered that sometimes when she was up here alone, she could hear breathing. Not her own breathing, but someone else's, coming from the walls or the floor or the ceiling. She couldn't tell where exactly, but it was there, slow and steady, like someone was trying very hard to stay quiet. I told her she was imagining things, that old wood creaks and makes weird noises. She made me promise not to tell our parents because she didn't want them to think she was being a baby. I promised, but I was worried. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I got out of bed and walked to my window, which had a perfect view of the backyard and the treehouse. The moon was almost full, bright enough that I could see everything clearly. And that's when I saw it. There was a light inside the treehouse. Not a bright light, more like the dim glow of a candle or a flashlight running low on batteries. It was moving too slowly, panning across the windows like someone was walking around inside with it. My first thought was that Emma had snuck out there, but then I heard her snoring from her room across the hall. I stood at my window for what felt like hours, watching that light move back and forth inside the treehouse. It never went to the windows, never shone directly outside, just kept circling the interior like whoever was holding it was searching for something. Eventually it went out, and the treehouse was dark again. I should have woken up my parents right then. Should have told them someone was in our backyard. But I didn't. part of me was scared they wouldn't believe me. Another part of me was genuinely terrified of what might happen if I drew attention to whatever was out there. The next morning at breakfast, I watched Emma carefully. She seemed normal. I wanted to ask her if she'd gone to the treehouse last night, but something stopped me. That afternoon, when Emma asked me if I wanted to play in the treehouse with her, I made up an excuse. I watched from my bedroom window as she crossed the backyard and climbed the spiral stairs alone. About 20 minutes later, she came running out of the treehouse so fast she almost tripped on the stairs. I ran to her door and knocked. She told me to go away, her voice muffled. I tried the doorknob, but she'd locked it. I stood there for a minute listening before finally walking back to my room. That evening at dinner, Emma barely touched her food. After dinner, my mom knocked on Emma's door and tried to talk to her, but Emma insisted she just needed to sleep. I waited until everyone was in bed before I snuck into Emma's room. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. She said we needed to talk about the treehouse, that something was really wrong with it. She said that when she'd been up there that afternoon, she'd found something carved into the wooden floor. It hadn't been there before, she was sure of it. The carving was hidden under one of the benches, etched into the wood in small, precise letters. It said, "Emma, don't tell anyone about me. They won't understand. I've been waiting for you." I asked her if she was absolutely sure it said her name. She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture she'd taken. There it was, carved into the wood in handwriting that looked almost childlike, but too neat to actually be done by a kid. I asked her what she did when she saw it. She said she'd run. She said she could hear footsteps behind her on the stairs following her down. But when she'd looked back, there was no one there. The phrasing was too personal, too specific. And the fact that it mentioned Emma by name meant whoever carved it knew who we were. We made a pact that night. We'd go to the treehouse together the next morning, take more pictures of the carving, and show them to our dad. But when morning came, Emma was gone. Her bed was empty. Her window was wide open, and she was nowhere in the house. I ran to my window and looked at the treehouse. The trapdoor in the floor was open. The one my dad had told us never to use, the one that had been sealed shut. It was hanging wide open, swinging slightly in the morning breeze. The treehouse was empty. Completely empty except for Emma's favorite stuffed animal, a worn-out bunny she'd had since she was a baby, sitting in the exact center of the floor. She never went anywhere without that bunny. My dad picked it up with shaking hands. I showed him the picture on Emma's phone of the carving, but when we looked under the bench, there was nothing there. Just smooth, unmarked wood. The police came within 15 minutes. They searched the entire property, the surrounding woods, interviewed all the neighbors. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. The police treated it as a potential abduction. The dogs tracked her scent from her bedroom window to the treehouse, then lost it completely at the open trapdoor, like she'd just disappeared into thin air. The investigation went on for weeks. Dead end after dead end. After about a month, the police presence started to dwindle. My parents hired private investigators, psychics, anyone who claimed they could help. Nothing worked. Emma was just gone, vanished like she'd never existed. I became obsessed with the treehouse after that. I'd spend hours up there searching for any sign of where Emma had gone. I'd pry up floorboards, check the walls for hidden compartments, examine every inch of that structure looking for answers. One night, about 2 months after Emma disappeared, I snuck out to the treehouse at midnight. I started with the trapdoor, examining the hinges and the frame. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. There were scratch marks on the underside of the door, deep gouges in the wood that looked like they'd been made by fingernails. Human fingernails. Small ones. Desperately clawing at the wood. I pointed my flashlight down through the trapdoor opening, expecting to see the ground about 10 feet below. But I didn't see ground. I saw darkness. Absolute pitch-black darkness that my flashlight couldn't penetrate. It was like looking into a void, an absence of everything. And as I stared into that darkness, I heard it. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing coming from somewhere deep below the treehouse, echoing up through the trapdoor. Then I heard something else. A voice, small and distant, calling my name. It sounded like Emma, but there was something wrong with it. It sounded flat, emotionless, like she was reading lines from a script. I was about to lower myself through the trapdoor when I felt hands on my shoulders pulling me back. I spun around expecting to see my dad, but the treehouse was empty. No one was there. The hands that had grabbed me were gone, but I could still feel where they'd touched me, cold spots on my shoulders. And then I heard Emma's voice again, but this time it was coming from behind me from inside the treehouse. I turned and saw her. Emma was standing in the corner of the treehouse. She looked exactly like she had the night she disappeared, but something was wrong with her eyes. They were too dark, too empty. She smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was too wide. She reached out her hand and told me to come with her, that it would be so much better if we were together. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was inside the house with the door locked behind me. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went outside to check the treehouse. They searched it thoroughly. They found nothing. No Emma, no mysterious darkness below the trapdoor, no scratch marks on the wood. Just an empty treehouse with a view of the backyard. The next day, my dad cut down the treehouse. He took a chainsaw and demolished the entire structure, ripped it apart board by board until there was nothing left but splinters and nails scattered across the grass. He even dug up the trapdoor section of floor and burned it in a metal drum in the driveway. When it was all gone, when there was nothing left but the oak tree standing alone in the backyard, my dad came inside and didn't speak for the rest of the day. But destroying the treehouse didn't change anything. That night, I heard tapping on my bedroom window. The tapping was insistent, rhythmic, deliberate. Finally, I pulled back the curtain and looked outside. Emma's favorite bunny was standing in the backyard right where the treehouse used to be, sitting upright in the grass covered in dirt like it had been buried and dug back up. We moved out a week later. My parents sold the house at a massive loss to the first buyer who made an offer. We moved 3 states away to a small apartment in the city with no yard, no trees, no room for anything to hide. My parents never talked about Emma again. They put away all her photos, donated her clothes, erased her from our lives like she'd never existed. But I still see her sometimes, mostly in reflections in windows or mirrors, standing behind me with that too wide smile. Sometimes I hear her voice calling my name from empty rooms. And every once in a while I'll find that bunny somewhere it shouldn't be. In my closet, on my car's dashboard, on my pillow when I wake up in the morning. It's always covered in dirt, always cold to the touch, and I always throw it away. But it keeps coming back. I'm 26 now, living on my own in a different state entirely. My parents think I've moved on, that I've accepted Emma's disappearance as one of those unsolvable tragedies. They don't know that I still dream about her every night. They don't know that I've spent years researching our old house, trying to find information about what might have been there before it was built. What I found didn't make me feel better. The property used to be part of a much larger plot of land, and in the late 1800s there was a children's workhouse on that site. Not an orphanage, a workhouse where poor kids were sent to do manual labor. The building burned down in 1894, killing 43 children who were locked in their dormitory rooms. The fire started in the middle of the night, and by the time anyone noticed, it was too late. All 43 children died of smoke inhalation before the flames even reached them. The oak tree, the one the treehouse was built in, was planted in 1895 as a memorial. It was supposed to be a symbol of life and growth. But I think something else grew in that tree. Something that fed on what happened there. And when someone built a playhouse in its branches, when children started spending time up there alone and vulnerable, it found a way to take what it wanted. I don't know if Emma is dead. Part of me hopes she is, because the alternative is so much worse. The alternative is that she's trapped somewhere in the darkness below, where that treehouse used to be, calling for help that will never come. Surrounded by 43 other children who've been waiting over a century to not be alone anymore. Sometimes I think about going back there to the house where we used to live. I think about digging where the treehouse stood, seeing what's actually underneath all that dirt and grass. But I'm too afraid of what I might find. Or worse, what might find me. The current owners of the house have 2 young kids. I've driven past a few times over the years just to see if they're okay. Last time I was there about 6 months ago, I saw something that made me pull over and sit in my car for an hour. There was a new tree house in the backyard. Not in the same tree, the oak was gone, cut down at some point. But they'd built a new one in a different tree. I wanted to knock on their door and warn them. Tell them to tear it down immediately, to never let their kids play in it alone. But what would I say? How do you explain something like this to strangers without sounding completely insane? So I drove away hating myself for not trying, but too broken and scared to do anything else. If you're listening to this and you have kids, please just keep them away from old tree houses, especially ones that come with the property that were built by people you'll never meet for reasons you'll never know. Because some things aren't meant to be played in. Some places aren't meant for children no matter how innocent they look. And some trees remember every terrible thing that ever happened around them, and they're patient enough to wait decades for another chance to feed. I miss my sister every day. I miss the version of her that existed before the treehouse, the real Emma who was loud and funny and drove me crazy in all the normal sibling ways. I'll never know what happened to her that night, not really. But I know enough to understand that the thing I saw in the treehouse, the thing wearing her face and calling my name, wasn't her. Couldn't be her. Because Emma would never smile like that. I hope wherever she is, she's not alone. I hope those 43 children found her and took care of her, that she's part of their group, now playing whatever games children play in the spaces between life and death. It's a nicer thought than the alternative that she's trapped and aware and desperately trying to get back to us. I couldn't live with that idea. None of us could. I still have the picture from her phone, the one showing the carving that disappeared. I've had handwriting experts look at it, paranormal investigators, even archaeologists who specialize in historical inscriptions. No one can explain it. Every year on the anniversary of Emma's disappearance, I receive a package in the mail. No return address, no note, just her bunny in a cardboard box. It's always clean this time, not covered in dirt, almost lovingly cared for. I don't know who sends it or how they keep finding my address when I move. I've tried staying awake to catch the mail carriers, setting up cameras, even filing police reports. Nothing works. The package always arrives, the bunny always pristine, and I always throw it away knowing it will come back next year. My therapist says I need to accept that Emma is gone and let go of the guilt. She says the packages are probably from someone who knew Emma. She says the things I saw in the treehouse were trauma-induced hallucinations, that my brain was trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy. She might be right about some of that. But she's never seen Emma standing in her window at night, smiling that wrong smile. She's never heard 43 children singing nursery rhymes in harmony from underneath where a treehouse used to stand. I'm telling this story now because the family who lives in our old house just listed the property for sale. I checked the listing photos and the new treehouse is gone. In its place is just empty space and a for sale sign that mentions recent unexplained incidents as the reason for the urgent sale. They have 2 daughters ages 6 and 9. Both are currently listed as missing. The investigation is ongoing. I don't know if I could have prevented this. I don't know if warning them would have made any difference, or if the thing that took Emma would have just found another way. But I carry that guilt now along with all the others. 2 more families destroyed by something that should have been burned out of existence over a century ago. If you've listened this far, thank you. I know this isn't the kind of story people want to hear. There's no twist ending, no clever revelation that makes everything make sense. There's just loss and confusion and the terrible knowledge that some questions will never be answered. But maybe someone hearing this will make a different choice than I did. Maybe someone will take their kids' fears seriously, will investigate the strange sounds, and the impossible messages, will tear down the innocent-looking playhouse before it's too late. Or maybe this story will just fade into the background noise of the internet, another creepypasta that people read, and forget, another cautionary tale that no one actually heeds. Either way, I've said what I needed to say. I've warned whoever will listen. And if you ever find yourself moving into a house with a treehouse already built in the backyard, a beautiful structure that seems too good to be true, please remember Emma. Remember the 43 children who died in the fire. Remember that some places were never meant for play. And whatever you do, don't let your children go up there alone. Because it's still out there, waiting, patient, hungry, and it remembers every child who ever climbed those stairs.